Hello and welcome to Empowered the Podcast. I'm your host, Linda Brand. Thank you for being here. I am so excited for today's guest, Christopher Grant Ward. Christopher is an award-winning artist and naturalist whose work has appeared in Architectural Digest, NPR, ABC News, and more. Christopher is also host of the Rebel Nature podcast, where he explores the ways nature can rewire our brains and change our perception of everyday things. This is super exciting. Welcome, Christopher, to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you and talk about your podcast and your beautiful art. You create beautiful furniture made out of wood from Africa. Share a little bit about your journey and a little bit about you wherever you want to begin.
Sure. Let's start with now, which is that I am a furniture artist. I create and design and build one-of-a-kind pieces of furniture. My pieces borrow heavily from the outside world, from the shapes and forms that we see in nature, in trees and plants, in animals. I have a certain love of insects that seem to come out in a lot of the pieces that I do, but also jellyfish and deer and lots of different types of plants. My mission as a furniture artist is to bring this sense of nature indoors because I believe it's healing and restorative. I believe that we are disconnected from the outside world in a way that's actually harmful to our well-being, to our cognitive processes. As an art form, bringing these pieces into your homes as furniture, not as pieces of art you hang on the wall necessarily, but as pieces of furniture that you interact with, really starts to create that connection.
I love that. I love that so much. We bring plants in from outside and it's a similar thing, right? You're just bringing,
Absolutely.
yeah. And tell us a little bit about the journey that the customer experiences when they work with you, because I know that's part of it.
It's definitely part of it. I was doing restoration woodworking for a long time. So I was helping clients restore their old homes. And that really started to pick up during COVID. And what I found was that people really began to love their homes and love their habitats, if you will, in a way that was different than it was before. They wanted more personality and more individuality inside of their homes. And 100 years ago, or even 110 years ago, the Art Nouveau movement, the arts and crafts movement that were very popular in the United States and everywhere around the world, the Western world, was exactly that sort of revolt against the Industrial Revolution. It was saying these objects that live in your home that you interact with every day should be pieces of art that you can celebrate, that everything that is created should have that touch of aesthetic quality to it. And we've lost that by and large in our society. But I found that my clients are actually coming to me to work with me directly the way it was 100 years ago to create a piece just for them. So what does that mean? My pieces have elements that echo their ancestry, their last names. A family I created a bench for, their last name was an Irish word that meant son of the summer sun, child of the sun. And there's 5 members of their family, so the inlay on top of the bench is actually a sun rising with 5 rays coming off of it, which would be interesting to sell as a product, but for them, it actually means something very specific that they'll hold on to for generations. I've made a table that was a wedding gift to a couple who honeymooned in Hawaii, and the inlay on top of the table actually echoes this sort of Maori prints that you can see all over Polynesia. The table is a dragonfly, which is a symbol of new beginnings, and the 2 legs in the middle actually are in a embrace to symbolize their first dance. So this is a table that they'll have to remember their wedding and that they can give to their children, etc. So heirloom pieces, one-of-a-kind pieces, my clients like to work with me directly to make the piece, to design it, to think of what they would like, what motifs and elements mean something to them. So that whole process becomes part of what is special about the object when it's done.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. I was going to ask you about designing. Are they telling you I want a butterfly or I want this, but together you're doing it together?
Yeah, sometimes like what I don't do so much is like they go like I'll get sometimes people will say I saw this in a catalog and I just want you to make this. And like I don't actually do that. I know some people who I can refer you to if you're just looking to make something. But if you're looking to make something that's in my artistic style, but you want it to fit a certain dimension, usually they'll come to me with some dimensions for a room. Or one client, her son is a surfer and they live right on the beach in Ventura, California. And he graduated high school and was moving to college. And she said, can you make a bench that sort of talks about his surfing, his love of surfing, but also they're very devout Christians, and we'd love to have some element of Christianity in there. And I'm not practicing Christian, but all religions and beliefs, that's special to them, and it's important to give that the due respect that it deserves. So I actually went to the Bible. I looked in throughout to find references to the ocean, to love and to respect. And I actually found Isaiah 51:15. May you rest upon the waves and hear the roar, and is the name of God Almighty, which I think I butchered that. I should know that by heart because I had to actually hand carve it into the bench. But the bench is actually a surfboard with this sort of abstraction of waves underneath it, including like a barrel roll inside. And it's all made out of Douglas fir because the fir tree is mentioned in the Bible as like a sacred tree. So every element of it was actually made to what this one individual wanted. And so I show the designs and they say, yeah, that works, or I wish it did this or that. And we do a couple rounds of going back and forth with CAD drawings, and then they get the final piece in a month or two.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. I love that. That's incredible. And you said the wood that you use is special wood from Africa, correct?
Correct. For all of my gallery pieces, if you go to my website, christophergrantward.com, you'll see that by and large, the pieces I make are from African mahogany. And the reason that I use those pieces for this series in 2024 is to call out how ecologically forward the legal system is in Ghana. Ghana is a small country in Western Africa that has gone out of its way to make sure that the mahogany and other lumber that grows naturally there, that's harvested, is done in a renewable way, a sustainable way, and most importantly, in a way that some of the revenue goes back to the local communities. And so what a lot of people don't know about deforestation is the assumption is, but harms the forest, they can't replenish themselves, they can't grow back, there's erosion. All of that's true. But one of the immediate effects of overforestation is the impact on the local communities that live nearby. I'm talking about destruction of roads, pollution runoff, traffic overcrowding, the devaluation or the lack of interest to live in those cities that are near those forestry companies. So you get this sort of damage to community. And Ghana is actually going out of its way to make sure that money from African mahogany is going back to make local schools, hospitals, roads, legal protections in place for the community. And so that's really important to me. So I wanted to actually highlight that because a lot of exotic woods, especially most species of mahogany, are incredibly damaging to the world. And it's a pretty audacious thing to import them and do all of that. Certainly importing African mahogany comes with its own carbon footprint. I do everything I can to offset that by using hand tools when possible, by using every piece of the wood. I use all the scrap pieces to create other forms and prototypes and mulch for me and my neighbors. So we do everything I can to very expensive African mahogany mulch that me and my neighbors have. But
yeah, love that about you. I love that you care about this, you care about the earth, the planet, people. I love that about you. And we talked a little bit prior about
Yeah.
different things, and you're very like a higher conscious being, and you care about
Oh, thank you.
things. Oh yeah, you're welcome. And we were gonna maybe, that's amazing, everything that you're doing and being conscientious about where what is coming from and all of that. It's really amazing. You also have a podcast that's called
Yes.
Rebel Nature. Tell us where
Yes.
the name Rebel Nature came from and what the podcast is about.
Yep. So Rebel Nature is a series of my journals just from backpacking in the Sierras for weeks at a time by myself, doing off-trail bushwhacking through especially the John Muir Trail and adjacent mountains and adventures through there, as well as just all of my observations of nature as I work on my art. I notice the disconnect between the way that life is lived normally in a modern world and the way it's lived when you start paying attention to the way nature works. And this is really important to me because my backstory is that I actually used to be, maybe 7, 8 years ago now, I was the vice president of product for Shutterstock, which is a global marketplace for photography and images in 46 countries. We made $1 million a day. I had an 80-person team, an office in the Empire State Building in New York City, and I hated all of it. I hated everything about it. Now, I do love going to New York City for a weekend, but to live there, to be in that system, to be working in all of that, it just shook me the wrong way, and I had to leave. And it took me a while to understand why, but it's really this sense of being disconnected from what I believe I and others are hardwired to love, which is the natural world. So Rebel Nature is a podcast that dives into those things and finds ways for us to rebel, to find an alternative, a challenge to the way that we are accustomed to living our lives. And that manifests itself in a number of ways. Everything from our language and speech, the words we use, the words that exist now that didn't exist before, that change the way that we perceive everyday things, to the invention of the clock and the way that we lived life before the clock and how we live it now, and what that means for our sense of self and what it means for our definition of our lives, to inventions that were meant to help us in many ways and actually ended up having a lot of deleterious effects on society, to inventions that were meant to solve one problem and actually went on to solve a number of wonderful things in American society that we didn't anticipate. And one of the things I talk about is the bicycle. The bicycle was invented simply to be a simple conveyance that didn't require fuel and, easily get an individual from A to B. But when the bicycle was created in America, it was actually at the apex or the crossroads of a lot of things that were happening. The suffrage movement in 1900 or so was happening, and the bicycle actually enabled women to go places unchaperoned, to meet up and assemble the suffrage movement without having to ask their husbands or other men to drive them around. It also encouraged them to dress differently, to wear pants and more, athletic type clothing that they would be more appropriate when you were exerting yourself riding a bike from A to B. So the bicycle, according to Susan B. Anthony, is one of the most important parts of the suffrage movement. There was no intention for the bike to do that. As well, the bicycle allowed people that lived in small towns who didn't have cars to go to the city and see what was there. It allowed people from the city to go to the country and see what was there. It encouraged America to make better roads, wider roads with bike lanes and shoulders. It encouraged people to find marriage partners outside of their hometown, which wasn't a thing before the bicycle. And if you think about Dunlop, which was an American manufacturer, and the Wright brothers, they were both bicycle manufacturers first, and then made their inventions of the tire and the airplane out of that. There's a number of ways that our society and the things that we make can help us and hurt us. And so I talk a lot about that in my episodes as well. Nature, however, has been proven to be this healing source that we all know intuitively. Like if you are stressed out, if you're having a bad day, if you're having a bad year and you want to go on vacation, we even call it like a retreat or an escape to go on a hike or sit on a beach. Or for me, I go backpacking, as I mentioned. We know intuitively that this undesigned world, this world without grids, this world of asymmetry and natural beauty, this world that is ambivalent to our existence in a good way, in a way where we realize we're actually just part of a system as opposed to something where we're taking goods and services and commoditizing them. It actually helps us to step outside ourselves and to find our true natural state, a state outside of time and schedules, a state outside of even language, which actually creates a lens with which we see the world differently, depending on how you speak, what language you speak, and what century you're in.
Yeah, I can talk for a long time, but I want to ask,
sorry.
No, it's perfect. I want to touch on, you talk about nature rewiring the brain. That's something you like to talk about. I want to talk on that. And I also want to talk about time because I find it really fascinating and being a spiritual person today, I wasn't raised that way, and being in the community with spiritual people. When I say spiritual, it's not religious, it's universe, source, spirit. And do you believe we live in an energetic, vibrational universe, that everything's energy?
Yeah, I do. And I think that there are any number of ways that humans have found to access that. While religion can have its negatives and its downsides for sure, especially in modern society, the precepts actually in the Bible, in the Quran, do actually speak to some of the same ideas of that we are all one, that we all share the same sort of source, that we
No, I bring
are.
it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I bring
so
spiritual
that it's just.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What I want to say is that the people like Kathleen Cameron, who was on the show, and these people who've studied under Wayne Dyer and Bob Proctor and all these people, they say time is an illusion. And that time is, that's why I was bringing up the time thing, because you talk about, and happening. Do you believe that everything's happening like at one time, like the past? And I don't know. It's really interesting. I like the idea that all we have is this present moment. This is all where we should live, is this moment in time.
What I talk about in my episodes, episode 3 of Rebel Nature, you can find it on Spotify and Apple and everywhere else, is that what we define as Linda or Christopher or, as my life is all based on time. So what do I mean by that? Everything you regret and everything that you're proud of and everything that you wish you could have done differently and everything that you are glad that you've done is part of your past. If you didn't have a past, you couldn't have any of those things. And all those things are part of the human condition, as well as your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, your plans. The reason that you don't spend all your money today going on vacation is because you believe in your future self. So to that degree, it's really hard to argue that those things don't exist in the present moment with you, and that your past, present, and future are actually just this sort of blurred extension of wherever you are as you move through time. I wouldn't personally go as far as to say time is an illusion in the sense that it's actually all happening right now. I can't prove that one way or another. Productively, I'm a pragmatist to some degree. So pragmatically, I can believe that an awareness of my past, present, and future simultaneously can create more stress and allow and make me second guess the way I act in the present moment, which is really all I have control over, so to speak. And I would say time is an illusion in the sense that it's more about the way that we manufacture it. My angle is going to be more in a modern world. We say that a day is 24 hours. We say that an hour is 60 minutes long. And if you don't use that hour for items A, B, or C, you've wasted time. If you get it done faster than an hour, you've saved time, you've earned time, you've stolen back time, you've lost time. This sense of time as a thing, that as a commodity to be used or spent or wasted, is a byproduct of literally capitalism. It's a sense of shame and pressure that is added to our everyday lives. Everyone listening to this program has a sense of waking up on time, early or late, or they might even be saying, I don't care what time I wake up. Even that sense is that an awareness of time and rebelling against it. We are completely driven inside of a lens of time. We use dishwashers and laundry machines and cars and microwaves so that we have more time. We don't churn our own butter so that we have our own time. If you look at some of the blue zones around the world, they reject some of this technology, not because they're anti-technology per se, but because some of the beauty of humanity comes in the exertion and the time it takes and the detail that comes from doing things by hand and meditating over them. And I find that's the same thing for me in my shop with my wood pieces. I do not manufacture anything. I make everything by hand. And those actions are treasures. That's why people love to bake and weed. I know people who love to weed their gardens instead of throwing pesticides. And I think that this sense of time is a governance on us that we go to nature to abandon. There is no clock in nature. Yeah, the sun's rising, the sun's setting. Yeah, there's nighttime. Yeah, there's daytime. But there is no sense of the schedule. And if there's any one thing that I would say we could do better at, if people are listening, is to just get some time away from time, to get some time away from your clock, from your phone, from your calendar, to find some way that you live some part of your life without thinking about how long it's taking to do that.
Tell us why you feel that's so important.
Our biological clocks, everyone knows that we have the circadian rhythm. So we know that we're supposed to wake up and we're supposed to go to sleep, and that the sun and the lack of sunlight dictate that. But what we also have, and everyone knows this or has maybe experienced this, is your ultradian clocks. You have this clock that for about 60 to 90 minutes will put you into a flow state. And it's this state that everyone's had where they're working so deeply on something that they love what they're doing, but they have no sense of time, that it's just flying by. And all of a sudden they realize that they've been doing something in this beautiful state of flow that wasn't aware of time. Daydreaming is very similar. And it's a natural way that we're supposed to live our lives. It's how human beings are hardwired to be.
Yeah, I want to tell a quick story. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I remember listening to Tony Robbins, and he was on the go and doing and just hustling. And he was in Fiji, and he asked this guy, they were in the water. Did you hear this story?
No.
Okay. And they were in the water, and the guy, he asked this man that lives there, and he says, "Sir, what time is it? What time is it?" And he stops and he looks around and he looks at the sun, and it's daytime.
Yeah.
And that's when Tony Robbins had this light bulb moment. Oh my God. I'm just like I'm like totally in the matrix, like you talk about.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
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 because
we're
guys
out of control with that. We're out of control with that.
like,
I have a similar anecdote that I'll tell as fast as I can if you entertain me. It's a parable, and usually they say it's like a German, but it could be anyone. I think they say it's a German because Germans are serious, but they're really not. So let's just say it's a businessman is in Fiji or someplace, and they see someone who's from Fiji sitting on the beach with a net full of fish, and they're just relaxing. And the businessman says, "It's only 10 a.m. You already have, are you not working anymore today?" And the local says, "No, I got, this is enough. I can sell this fish and it'll buy me my food. It pays for my utilities or whatnot. I have enough." And the businessman says, "Yeah, but if you worked all day, then you could buy another boat. Then you could have somebody else work for you." I think you can see where this parable is going. You could build a fleet of ships. And then one day you could retire and you wouldn't have to do anything. And he's, "Yeah, but I don't have to do anything right now." It's the sense of what we put ourselves through every day to get to a place that we could just naturally be if we rearranged our lives and let go of certain absolutes that we think we need to have is right there in front of us. The short way of saying it is we could have, as human beings, chosen to skinny dip and eat fruit all day, but
right,
instead we created mortgages.
right. No, I know,
Right?
you mentioned that, and I know, but I think it's society.
You do have to have some sense of organization, and like our homes are created because we needed shelter and protection from a natural world that actually isn't very hospitable to human beings without some of those protections. It's just that I think my perception, my take isn't necessarily that all of these things are bad in whole, but just that maybe we've gone too far.
No, I agree 100%. And I was going to also share a story, like when you were talking about like when you're working on your furniture and how you love it, and it's just time just gets away because you're just enjoying, and these kind of basic things like the people in the blue zones, is that this one spiritual one of the coaches in a community of mine, she loved folding laundry. That was like her.
Oh yeah, I love folding laundry too.
Yeah.
Don't tell Tosca, but I,
Yeah.
but I do. And in the episode about time, you can also discover that what were considered the peasants in the Middle Ages, they actually only worked 150 days a year. They had more than half of the year off from work. And the work it was difficult farm type work, but by no stretch of the imagination were they working as hard as modern Western civilizations are today. So all of this modernization and technology, it's meant to give us more time, but then we as human beings don't have the discipline to use that time for regeneration and relaxation. We use it to just do more things. And I think that's the point of the parable I was telling you
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. No, and in the rebel nature thing, but so back to the energy,
Yeah.
do you believe though that it's like when a human passes or dies in the hospital, they take these pads and they put them on to bring you back to life. These electrical, we're mostly energy, we're mostly water. Do you believe that we're energy? And that's why when you're outside, like you're talking about, let's talk about the rewiring human by being in nature. We are one with nature, right? Do you believe?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think what you discover is that it's all from the same place, as opposed to these artificial things that don't resonate with you, right? That this resonating isn't just a figurative or a poetic sense of the word resonating. It actually has a resonance. I do stand in my yard without shoes on to connect back to the ground source, because it is part of who we are, and we're meant to connect with that.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a meditation practice? Do you regularly meditate?
I don't, I wouldn't say that I meditate. I have in the past, in following usually like the Zen Buddhist principles of meditation and what it's for. I tend to find my meditations if meditation for me is a way to abandon these constructs, especially time, but other things as well, and to get to just the moment.
Yeah.
That happens for me much more through physical exertion. I do a lot of trail running. I do a lot of yard work. I find that my meditations happen more when I'm active and not necessarily when I'm sitting still. If I'm doing it the right way, I will get into that mode where I've forgotten myself, right? That's the whole idea. So yeah, I would say that my meditations, I do, but they actually happen and I'm purposely doing certain activities. I have an episode of Rebel Nature, I think it's episode 4 or 5, that talks about just our sense of humanity, of intelligence, of the linguistic construct that there are humans and animals, and that if we call ourselves animals, we're using it in like a figurative way. We don't actually think of ourselves, most of us. I'm sure lots of people listening have gone through these hoops, but as a society, linguistically, we think of humans as different than animals. I think that's a fair statement. Where the Native Americans and other sort of indigenous peoples didn't have a way to distinguish between humans and animals. We didn't even have that ability. So I actually dive into what does it mean to be human in contrast to animals. And it's an important way to look at our humanity because it has impacts on how we treat animals for sure. If there's vegans listening to your podcast right now, certainly this sense of not being different, that all animals have emotion, which has been proven, that all animals not only feel pain in the scientific way, but more importantly, can suffer. As soon as we've proven that, that science gets buried because it's just too difficult for modern society to understand, to grapple with.
Yeah.
But more so than that, there are animals that can do things we couldn't even dream of doing. And there's animals that we consider to be less intelligent than us that actually can do everything we can, perhaps in different ways. But so, for example,
what are the 3 fascinating animals that you?
one of the most fascinating animals in the world for me are the killer whale or the orca. Because when you define intelligence in like a human sense, humans are evolved to have certain types of intelligences to solve certain things. When you see like early studies of testing orcas for intelligence, you're asking them to solve logic puzzles or like this or that multiple choice type things, which humans are pretty good at doing, reasoning. But if you were to ask a human to recall an object that they saw 5 years ago in perfect detail, there'd be no way we could do that. But an orca can actually just send out signals from its frontal lobe to detect an object using what more or less is sonar, take that image, process it, and then 5 years later, send that image to another in its pod and describe what they saw. So who needs words in a world where you can just send perfect images to one another? And not only that, it's been proven that they can manipulate those images as they send them. So these are abilities that human beings could never possibly imagine having. The ability to just completely think with words outside of any sense of a language, that there are no words for any of these things. They're just things that can be broadcast to one another.
Study Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you ever studied?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
talks about a lot of things with the what we're capable of with pineal gland. I'm not a big science girl, but more spiritual, but I know science is catching up. But I don't know all
Yeah.
the things, but we are way more powerful than we know in our brain.
Right. And it makes sense that because orcas have, if you look at the skeletons inside of their flippers, they have 5 digits. They have hidden inside, they have vestigial legs. They're
Wow.
not that much different than us,
Wow.
but they've evolve differently in different environments to be able to do different things in different ways. And that's the lesson, I think, that we are a product of where we are and how we live and how we're designed to experience the world. And our intelligence or our emotions, our sense of being sentient or alive, all has to do with like where we are and how we live our lives. So if we're living in a modern world that's broken from the natural one we're designed to live, we're going to struggle to keep up with all of the signals coming in from our phones. We're going to struggle to
Well, it's
keep,
draining our energy. It's
yeah,
draining the energy. Sure. These are facts. So like you want to, there's a new book out, a newer book by a physician who, she was a surgeon and she was taught to prescribe and cut, and these people kept coming and she was like, wait, why aren't we figuring out the cause? Why are we just cutting and prescribing? What's the root cause? And anyway, she left you probably heard of her. Anyway,
I
Casey,
haven't. No.
yeah, she wrote a book called Good Energy, and she talks
Oh,
about everything like sitting at a computer and not being out in sunlight and taking caffeine and you're not getting enough sleep and all these things that like the whole treating the human as a holist, not just, oh, this doctor's for your nose, this doctor's for your this.
right.
It's a whole thing, right? Oh, anyway, the point is what you said about nature, like sunlight, proper sleep, nutrition, all these things, healing. Like you always see these posts on social media, right? That the best medicine is nature, is eating fruits and vegetables, is being out in nature, getting fresh air,
Right.
exercise, moving your body, right? All these things. So I just find that to be interesting. But also, I was just going to say that this rabbi was on a podcast and he said something about the difference between humans and animals, and that animals are reacting or going by instinct, where a human as a choice, or like he said something around like when you choose to be good, that's like the thing where you know there's one way you could be, and then you're choosing to be better, to do the right thing, I guess is what it was like some different, it was some kind of, I don't know. I just thought I'd bring that up when you were talking about like the difference between humans and animals.
But I mean, if I mean that actually suggests a sense of morality. I don't know if the person you're referring to was suggesting that animals don't have a sense of morality, or
I don't think he was saying that. It was more like if an animal's hungry and there's a piece of meat, they're just their instinct. Like if I'm walking my dog and he sees a squirrel, like he's going for that squirrel. It's not going to be like, oh, I don't want to hurt that squirrel. I'm gonna go after
mm,
that squirrel. That's its instinct.
yeah, that's not been my understanding studying this subject. It's actually been much more that elephants mourn their dead, and that humpback whales push their baby who died in childbirth around for weeks in the water, mourning their loss. That rats tickle each other for
Uh,
fun
I
to
love that.
play, and that those social interactions are important because all animals have learned that there's safety in numbers, that there's their importance to being part of a tribe, that caring for others actually is an important aspect. A lot of, and again, I don't know what that point was, but I'm just going to make this point that part of what my episode is about is this sense that animals aren't animals in the sense that they're just automatons that are reacting to the world any more than we are. That it's actually probably an arrogance on our part to say that we have a self-control that other animals don't have. We all respond in rageful, unpredictable ways. We've all done that. We all surprise ourselves with what we didn't mean to say or didn't mean to do.
A lot
And
of
I
it,
think, go ahead.
I was just gonna say a lot of it's how you're raised. Somewhat like I consider I raised myself from age 12 up basically, and I didn't do a very good job. And I've just been reparenting, and I learned it's like being raised with emotionally immature people and all these things. And I consider myself, I don't know, 20 years old or something. I'm just kidding. But the point is, like, it just depends on who's like, same with an animal. Like these studies where like a tiger gets raised by,
Yeah, their environment
it's their environment.
changes
Yeah.
everything.
And they don't know. Yeah, I love those stories. I love those stories. And then say it's all sheep and then a tiger, and then it sees a real tiger and they bring him over and give him a piece of meat or something. And I'm like, wait, no, I don't eat that. That's not.
Yeah,
And then he teaches them, yeah, oh, this is who I am. It's sad. It's so sad. It's being authentic, being our authentic selves. And I think when you were living in New York and doing this job and you had checked all these boxes and you were so unhappy, it was your authentic self, your soul that was miserable. This isn't where I belong. This isn't who I am. And now you're doing
right.
passion and purpose work. And now you are doing what you love and you are enjoying, but you're so conscious of these things, these computers and everything that's draining us and taking us away from our natural. That's just my belief too. I'm so happy when I get away from my phone and I like, it's so fun. I'm a
Right.
little bit scared when I don't have it, when I leave the house in the car, because it's like, oh, if something happens and I break down or whatever, but I love being away from my phone. It's like super fun. It's,
Yeah.
and sometimes at night, I'll be like, okay, I'm not going to touch my phone, but then I want to take a picture or I've got to look something up or I got to write my calendar or something. But the reality is, I love the getting back to how I know you're not that much younger than me, I don't think, but we grew up, we didn't have these devices.
Didn't didn't have devices, and we didn't have this idea of the rest of the world. I think, like when I talk to my nieces and nephews, they're aware of what everyone their age looks like and acts like around the world 24/7. You can find everyone centralizes with this centrifugal force or centripetal force towards the center of things, and so that everyone can be the same. And when I was growing up, I was born in 77. I didn't have any of that sense of what the world was in a way that I think is actually pretty healthy. I could go explore it and understand it, but there was this sense that I was there with my own thoughts and my own ideas and my own individualism, and I was able to, in my formative years, establish those thoughts. And then I think being that age, it's actually pretty fortunate because then now I have that sort of foundation to build off of, where I can know myself without the context of a million other people. I'm not sure if that makes total sense to people. It's certainly not a judgment on anyone from any age. There's certainly pros and cons to living in any era. But for me, I find that to be an advantage where I actually didn't have that context of what everyone's wearing or doing or saying or what the memes are. I didn't know those things. And I know it's going to make me sound like an old person, but for me, it was really more just about what I was thinking. A lot more of my own thoughts were able to bubble up.
Right, but are your is it niece and nephew or is it all girls, nieces? Or because mostly girls are different than boys, and you were a boy.
There certainly are, and I'm not qualified at all to talk about. There certainly are aspects of growing up as a woman in modern society online that are horrifying. That's a whole other.
Yeah, we get for hours. You're amazing. So tell us. So let's figure out. There was a couple questions we didn't really. Let's see. So
we were talking about. You wanted to know about childhood. I can talk
childhood and nature, and also just the rewiring of the brain. Tell us how being in nature rewires. Is it, like I said, just that it's healthier and the sun and or is it there's more to it that with the.
It's everything that I just said encapsulated into one kind of sentence, which is just that we live in a world where we think we wake up and we don't even realize anymore that, like I talk about in one episode, like the word for blue didn't always exist and we couldn't always see the color blue. That I'll see you in a minute is actually a construct that we can either succeed or fail to achieve. that the things we use and the ways we communicate are actually all parts of a modern world that is changing the way that we think and the way that we perceive ourselves through time and our reality. And so rewiring your brain is simply this idea that being in a certain place, like we've been talking about, can change the way that you actually live your life. And so spending more time in nature, and again, I'm not saying abandon everything and go to the woods, although that sounds really nice,
I know
right?
it
And
does.
the fact that sounds really nice to lots of people,
Yeah.
with all that humanity has achieved and worked on to build and create, the fact that sounds wonderful is is probably more of a lesson than I could ever explain. But just that sense that being outside more often, really connecting, like you're saying, with the energy that's there, really believing in that and finding that aspect of yourself, you're depriving yourself of a whole part of you that is, I don't know, like your deepest, most fundamental self.
Yeah.
And nature does have this power to do that. And by and large, nature is still free. It's
Mm.
not equally available for all socioeconomical groups, I wouldn't say. And that's a whole other episode I talk about. But it is by and large free to go to parks, to drive to a national monument. And one of the greatest things about America, one of the greatest things that we do, that we created, that we started first, was this preservation of public spaces, not for a king or a wealthy landowner, but for everyone.
I love that.
And we did that, perhaps not even realizing why, but we did that to give everyone this way to connect back to source. And now those national parks all over the world, but the first one was a state park called Yosemite in California. And the whole idea of park systems grew from there. There were preserved lands, but they were private. And so this sense of being able to use that material, those systems, those stages for finding a new part of yourself just by being there. You don't have to do anything. It's like meditation. The point is not to do something, it's to be somewhere. And I believe that there are lessons to be told there that can rewire the way that we think and the way that we perceive the grandest ambitions, but also just everyday things and their use. I was just looking around to see if there was something that I could pick as an example. My sunglasses are right here. Sunglasses are great. They keep the sun out. Studies have shown that our eyes actually want to see the sunlight so that it can stay as connected and in tune with our circadian rhythms as possible, and that wearing sunglasses actually even disrupts that. They look cool, but even everyday things around us don't jive necessarily with what we're meant to do in our lives and how we're meant to live.
Right. Like we're taught that you wear sunscreen and protect yourself from the sun. And then, all these beliefs that like sun is good for us. Sun is, it's healthy. And so we've just been taught a lot of things that aren't truths. And, maybe there was good intentions behind them. But I think your main message sounds like in today's world where everything's fast and tech and all these things like that, I think you're very self-aware, and I am too. And that's why I love being off the technology, because I recognize when it's draining me, when it's not feeling good. And it's just wild. Everybody is carrying around this. You're at the gym and people are staring at it, and you see a couple at dinner or lunch or whatever, and they're both on their phones. And I know that it's a convenience and all that, but it's just taking away from normal conversation. That's what I like about the podcast. We're actually having a deep conversation, not face to face, but
there you go, right there.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a positive that we have this ability. You're in California, I'm in Florida, and we are having this conversation face to face. But like, it's a beautiful thing in a way. But sitting all day is not what we're meant to do. And sitting at a computer all day is not what we're meant to do. And I remember when my son was in Tampa, when he got his first engineering job, and he was like, this is it. And there's no windows. And I'm here for 8 hours. And like, I went to college and this is what it is. No. And he ended up doing something different. And now he works from home and all these things. But even school, even that girl, the book that I told you about, Good Energy with that doctor, she even
Yeah.
the kids aren't supposed to sit still for 8 hours, like at school. Like that's
No, right,
even-
right,
and
yeah.
then they want to medicate them because they're high energy. It's anyway.
I agree, and I do want to say a couple things. It's probably too late because if I've turned off some people, they probably already turned off the episode or whatnot. But I certainly don't think that all technology is bad. I certainly do not think that we should abandon the world that we live in for nature. I certainly think there are benefits, like you just mentioned, that we are able to connect and be friends without actually ever meeting in person, which is like a new thing. That's actually really exciting. I think it's just being aware of the pros and cons of the mediated world in which we live. I always realize I'm in danger of sounding like some old fart that doesn't understand the modern times by saying, oh, okay, this is the way things are and phones are changing your life and all of these things. But I'm not going to pull my punches on that as much as just to say, my podcast and my art is just about finding that perspective and remembering that as you move about your day to day and incorporating that in the sense of truly bringing it into your body, into your day to day life. Just an awareness of how things are can change everything from just the minute to minute way you live to the way you think about your future and your past and your aspirations and what you want for your life and what it means to be alive. I did want to make sure that was clear because I can tend to sound a little bit like a misanthrope about some of these things.
I want to know, what do you think as to why we are here?
Why we exist?
Yeah.
Certainly incredibly simple and difficult, incredibly. The thing is, I think we are able to define our purpose by finding like a connection between where our passion lies and where we feel like we can make a difference. And there's so many ways you can talk about that. But I think that going back to one of the first things you said, if you're going to press me on it, we live in a continuum of past, now, and future. And it's our job not necessarily to alter or change what's going to happen or what's happened in the past or where we are, but just to understand it. And that I'm spending my entire life just trying to understand where I exist in the world and how it makes a difference, if at all, and how I can use this tool that I've been given to do something worthwhile. A lot of people don't necessarily think that you need to do something worthwhile, that just being is enough. And I think that's fine. I think for me, that does matter to me. So I think that's where I would lie on the spectrum of why we are alive type of thing.
So when you say the tool, are you saying your physical body, or you're saying
your body, your mind, your soul, your gifts, your weaknesses, your ideas, your opinions, your strength, your character?
okay. So Sherry Ann Boyle was on the show. She's written like 10 or 12 books, and she's a spiritual coach, and she has a podcast called Just Ask Spirit. And her most famous book is Emotional Detox. And she thinks, in our interview, I said, why do you think we're here? And she said, I think we're here to feel. And I just love this question because I think we're here to grow, evolve, heal, help others, and love. I think we're here to love ourselves and others. And I just was curious because this whole energy and motion, that's another book she wrote, Energy and Motion. And emotion we were talking about earlier. And the feeling thing, I have to believe as humans, one thing we have is I love flowers. I love good food. I love smelling wonderful things. It's all these, I'm a sensual being, but I'm not the only one. We are like, we like to see your furniture, right? It's something you look at. I study the Course in Miracles too. Have you heard of that? Have you studied?
No, I haven't.
So the
This is
Course,
why I love doing these podcasts with you because I learn all these things myself. No, I haven't heard of this.
so the Course in Miracles, you might be interested in it. And she basically, it's like a Bible and all the big Tony Robbins, all these Gabby Burt, everyone references the Course. And it teaches us that there's love, higher source, higher self, abundance, and then there's fear, lack, ego. Ego, it talks a lot about ego, it talks a lot about fear and love. And that's the miracle, is the shift from fear to love. And it talks about forgiveness, and it talks about we're spiritual, energetic beings having human experience. It talks about like these objects aren't even real. Like it's not even real. So it's really interesting. You might love it. You might love it.
I love looking at that stuff. I loved doing courses in philosophy, especially in epistemology and metaphysics. I think again, I fall on the side of like pragmatism and tools and like where I can actually hold on to an idea and activate it in my life. So sometimes I'm not sure if those things are true or not. And this with all due respect, I'm not sure how much some of those things matter to, as much as how do they affect the way I eat breakfast or treat my wife or
Right. I get it.
And so I think that's what I'm always looking for with those ideas. I think it's so important to dig into that and to look at that. But I really am always looking for the so what with that. So like where I can work. And I think that I'm definitely interested to hear more about that.
The reason it helps you, it's also saying that you're me and I'm you. So when I help you, I'm helping myself. When I help myself, I'm helping
And
someone.
that's definitely true.
So there's a lot of Buddhist teaching in the course. But the reason, what I loved what you said is how I eat my breakfast or how I treat my wife and what I eat for breakfast or something about your breakfast. And those two things are so beautiful because, you know, those are what matters. I like that.
And so like the individual who said we're here to feel, like for that person, the manifestation of feeling is what she has found as her, I don't know, her lighthouse, her signal pattern for existence. And I think everyone is going to, again, words are really not very good at defining some of these things because what is the difference between feeling and thinking and expressing and understanding? But it's a beautiful way to say it because I think it's not just about solving a problem. It's really about the nonverbal sentiment that comes out of you. And really that's what emotions are. And so I think that's a great way to describe this sense of being alive. Why we're here, I think, again, is really, it's like the purpose of me being here is to live my life and discover myself and what I'm capable of.
Yeah, you're an inspiration to others because you're just living your dharma, your purpose work, and you're being your authentic self.
I hope so.
You have a beautiful marriage, all these things. But what I wanted to say about the feeling is healing. When you cry,
Yes.
healing, right? The body keeps.
Very true.
There's something I just learned, like in the last 24 hours, that like really changed some things. And it said that the body is the subconscious mind. And I was like, oh my God, that's so incredible. So the point is we all, from 0 to 7, we're sponges and recorders, and we're taking on these beliefs and stuff from our parents and caregivers. And that's what defines, like you talk about programs and rewiring rewiring ourselves being in nature, but we all have some stuff to heal. And
Yeah.
So I just think part of why we're here is to heal, grow, and evolve, and then help others along the way, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
Yeah.
and then love. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think every day is a gift, and we're here to learn something, and if we don't learn it, we're gonna come back and have to learn it until we learn it or something.
And that's
Don't
true
you
for
believe
sure.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I do think that there's enough evidence, there's anecdotal and just study. There's enough to suggest that we are more than this one life in terms of memories we bring with us and baggage we carry forward, and the way humanity as a system continues to repeat things is just all evidence to me that this can't be coincidental, that we aren't, I don't know, transient souls that are moving from one corporal state to another, and like you said, learning some lessons or not. And again, this sense of understanding myself it does have to do with that. It does have to do with this sense of, do I understand like what I am, who I am?
You believe,
Um,
yeah, do you believe we can have, be, and do anything we desire?
I believe that
Like manifesting, and if you have put your mind, you can have, do, and be anything you want if you set your mind and you focus and you.
in one word, yes, I do. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. In one word, I absolutely believe that. Yeah.
that's awesome.
I think that, like all thoughts like that, I think that the idea of manifesting has been abused by the author culture to suggest that that's all you have to do, that there isn't something else to it. And I do think that it encourages inaction. And I think that there's a sense that manifesting is something that is like a spell, right? That will create a different life for you by simply believing it or casting the spell, as opposed to what it changes within you as you have agency in the world. And that if you go into the world believing that you can do a thing, yes, there's no way you could do it unless you believed it, but there's also no way you could do it unless you went into the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that gets left out. So
You nailed it when you said believe. Believing is pretty much, beliefs is pretty much everything. Wayne Dyer said, you will receive it when you believe it. So it's not, oh, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe that's true when I see it. It's you have
right.
to believe it first and then you'll see it. And it's all beliefs, and we can change our beliefs and then everything changes from there. So it's all so interesting. Yeah, but this is really a great conversation. I know we could
Yeah.
so long because you have so much to say and you are so interesting and very intelligent and you're definitely a thinker.
Yeah, I do try to, like I said, I do try to stop thinking sometimes.
Yeah, well,
But yeah, I totally enjoyed this conversation. And again, I'm an artist. I try to think differently about the world every day. I do want to say to everyone listening, I certainly think there are many ways to live, and that there isn't just one way. But I have found for myself that nature does create this opportunity for a redemption from where I've lived in modern life. And the whole point of Rebel Nature is to explore if that could be the same for other people. And so if it is, that's great. I encourage you to check it out. There might be pieces that you take away and other things that you don't quite resonate with, and that's okay.
yeah, I sent it to a couple people. Do you have guests on there at all, or is it mostly?
Season 1 is ending next week, and all of season 1 has no guests. Season 2 is going to have a number of really cool guests. One is a friend of mine who is a scientist who does work in biomimicry. So looking at animals and understanding their engineering and bringing that to technology in really interesting ways. And also talking to people who are doing environmental architecture, sustainability, a number of things that I'm really excited about in terms of guests next season.
That's awesome. That's really.
Yeah.
And then I know that you mentioned a lot of animal advocacy. You talked a lot about nature and animals, and I also have deep compassion. So you said you do eat animals, you just make sure they come from where they come from, right?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
You're not plant-based, but you,
I'm not plant-based, but I don't buy any processed foods, and I eat very little animal products. I found that I can't sustain myself otherwise. I have an incredibly kind of detailed, specific way that
you eat.
go about purchasing. Yeah, and
Like
and I struggle with it. It's challenging to walk through, and I certainly understand how someone might see the hypocrisy of what I've said versus that. But I do. Everyone does their best with the place they are.
they
So
do, yeah. I just was at the store today and I was like, what am I gonna buy? I don't know what to eat. I don't know.
yeah.
But
Like
anyway,
we don't like Tosca and I, my wife Tosca and I, we really don't like Thanksgiving for that. It's like a very meat gravy centric, like it's just not what we do. Most of the time we're eating tacos. Most of the time it's beans, and if we're going to put meat on it, it's the impossible meat, which is great. Tofu, and a little bit of where I kind of dive into animal products usually is a little bit of yogurt now and then is seems to be good for my digestion, I found, and some supplements that are derived from that and some things like that. But we do our best, you know.
me too. Thank you so much for this conversation. And
Thank you.
you're welcome. Where can people find you?
So you can find me if you're going to go to one place. It's going to be ChristopherGrantWard.com, and from there you can see my work. You can click the nav link to go to my podcast. You can also read my blog, which is essentially just my journals, and get in touch with me. I love to talk to people. I'm putting a new line of furniture out this Friday, which would be 26th, like November 29th or 30th or so. I'm excited about it. They're pieces that are less expensive, that are more designed for the home, the way you would shop for furniture normally. So I'm going to be doing that. You can also follow me on Instagram, and it's just at ChristopherGrantWard.com, or sorry, at ChristopherGrantWard.
And then I have one last question. How did you learn how to make furniture, or when did you learn and how did you learn?
I learned about 2 years ago, and if you asked me to make something other than what I was imagining in my head, I couldn't do it. I can do these things, but I'm certainly not a woodworker. I'm a very kinesthetic, do the things I need to do to create the things I want to create. But so it's been about 2 years. I had a background in woodworking in the sense of like being able to do trim work and doors and windows and things like that. So I had the basic skill sets, but I've been doing furniture for about 2 years.
Wow. Yeah, you have some beautiful pieces. So I highly
Thank
recommend
you.
anybody listening, you're welcome to go and check out your website because there's some very unique pieces. And I think that what you're doing is really cool. So keep up the amazing work.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And it was great talking. So
It was absolutely a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm so glad we could do this.
me too. Thank you. Thank you.